Hi and welcome to my channel. I'm so glad you're here. This will be my first character video from the Stormlight Archives and I'll be talking about Dalinar. If you have read these books and have invested the time into these hefty, large page count books, you probably have strong opinions on these characters and on Dalinar, who I'm talking about today. And because each of the Stormlight Archive books have pretty full character arcs for each book, this is going to be Dalinar in the Way of Kings. So there will be spoilers for The Way of Kings, but not for the further books. So if you've only read the first one, you're safe here. Dalinar has a brutal and passionate past. In The Way of Kings, we don't get a lot of details about his past yet, but we get little glimpses and we get enough. We know that he was the Blackthorn. We know that he has a lot of regrets. We know that he, in some ways, is kind of overcompensating for that past in the way that he lives now. Here's some words that kind of help describe what kind of person he is when we meet him in the first book. He is careful, he is deliberate, he is strong, he is honorable, and he really cares about people. Here's something that I find really encouraging about Dalinar. In this book, he's in his 50s and he's still trying to find himself. Does that seem a little bit relatable? I think it does. And I think it could be easy to say, well, if he's in his 50s, he should have his life figured out by now. It doesn't work that way. No matter how old you are, there's always more to discover about yourself. There's always more challenges to overcome, and there's always more growth to have happen. And if you are newly into your 20s, you might be thinking, well, I grew up. I should be accomplishing all the things that I thought I was going to when I was younger. Or maybe you're in your 30s and you're like, well, I still haven't done it. What do I actually care about now? Where is my life going? What am I doing with my life? And you just keep getting older and older and wondering, what's happening? Where is my life going? How did this happen? How did I get to this point in my life? Dalinar is someone who gets you. He's still on that journey himself. And I love that his character arc includes that journey of self-discovery. That is so relatable to so many people, no matter how old they are. If you're in your 50s, I'm not calling you old, but you are older than me. And at this point in his life, Dalinar is still a passionate man, but he tends to hide it and keep it down. He really struggles with trying not to let the Blackthorn loose. That's not who he thinks he is anymore, and he struggles with that. He has to be able to accept that that's who he was. Being the Blackthorn and being that person has made him into who he is now, and he just has to move forward from where he is now. Dalinar also has quite the reputation. Because he was the Blackthorn, his reputation is one of being a great warrior, one of the greatest in Alethkar, if I said that right. But his reputation is changing. People are saying different things about him now. Now when people talk about him, words come up like coward and mad. But that's only because people can only see his actions and what he does. They can't see his intentions and what's in his heart and why he's making the choices he makes. But boy, are they willing to judge him on those actions. And to be fair, going mad is something that Dalinar himself fears. He doesn't understand what's happening to him. He doesn't know why he's getting these storm visions. Either they're real and coming from God himself, the Almighty, or they're a product of his own mind for some reason. And that could be a little scary, thinking that something is happening to you that you can't control. Dalinar is a strong character. He doesn't want to be out of control. Not that I think he's a control freak, but it could still be scary. The cowardice part, though, is completely false. People say that about him because they're judging him based on what they think a man should be. He's not fitting into their expectations, so they judge him harshly and call him coward. Anyone who knows him well will know how false that is. But the problem is, nobody does know him that well. And it's partly his own fault because he doesn't really open up to people. Do you really see him in this book baring his heart and his soul to anyone and just saying, hey, here's really what's going on with me? No, he keeps it all bottled up inside. Or when he does try to talk about what's important to him and why he follows the codes and why the Way of Kings, the book within the book, is important to him, people judge him, laugh it off, call him old and senile, and you're going down the same path as Gavilar, and they just kind of slough it off. Nobody sees what Dalinar thinks as important as being as important as Dalinar does. That can be a little rough when you so highly value something and nobody else gets it. So when he does try to open up, nobody gets it. And so nobody understands who he is inside, and so they just judge him. Speaking of what's deep inside of Dalinar, something that is so deeply important to him is protecting Elhokar and the kingdom. Dalinar loved his brother Gavilar, and he feels so guilty for letting him die. He lives with this guilt every day, and he tries to make up for that by doing his best to protect what he sees as being all that's left of Gavilar, which is his son, Elhokar, and his kingdom. So Dalinar has devoted himself to protecting the kingdom and the king. And protecting those two things, the king and the kingdom, are what forms the bond of trust between Dalinar and Sadeas. Dalinar is so sure he can trust Sadeas, his old friend. They don't like each other anymore, but he is so firmly sure that they are on the same page with protecting things that even if they don't like each other, they can trust each other. And that deep and firm trust makes Sadeas' later betrayal so much worse. And speaking of protecting Elhokar, I really love how we're introduced to Dalinar in the Way of Kings on this Chasm Fiend hunt. We see Dalinar being the careful and strong warrior who holds himself in check until the person he loves is in danger. Then we see him rush in. He literally grabs the claw above his head and holds it physically with his body. And I think this scene really sets up Dalinar's character arc for the book. The way he holds himself in check until his strength is needed, and then he rushes in to the rescue, lets the Blackthorn loose as needed, then reins it back in. And as part of his character arc and his journey in finding himself, we really see Dalinar struggle. He struggles bad. We see him struggling with himself internally, with his son Adolin. He struggles in his relationships with the king and with Sadeas. He struggles with his feelings for Navani, and hugely with his feelings of guilt from the past, which Navani wisely calls him out on. And how can he protect the king and the kingdom while still following the codes and ideals from the Way of Kings, which he so highly values? Journey before destination is really what Dalinar is going through right now. And I think a lot of that journey, at least in the first part of the Way of Kings, is his internal fight with himself. He has to get past that before the journey can continue. And to make it harder, oftentimes he feels like, or he actually is, on this journey alone. Even the people closest to him, like his sons and Navani, don't really understand the struggle he's having. I'd like to talk a little bit about Dalinar's strengths and weaknesses. What are some of his most obvious and great strengths? Well, strength. Strength is a strength, right? Strength of character. Rock solid determination. I put stubbornness on my list of strengths for him because stubbornness could be a strength or a weakness depending on how it's applied to your life. And Dalinar stubbornly holds to his chosen codes of honor despite what anybody thinks of him and what anybody says about him. I think that's a strength. Decisiveness. When he decides on a course of action, nothing can deter him. And his honor is definitely a strength here. The highest prestige that a person, and especially a warrior, can get in his kingdom is being a shard bearer. And guess what he does? You don't have to guess, you've read the book, you know. He gives up both his sword and his plate for other people, for the benefit of others. The sword is to free people, and he holds those people's lives far higher than this sword. The plate he gives up for his son. He told his son that he would get him one. He made a promise. He's going to uphold that promise. So the physical objects that other people would value, sure, he values them, but not more than other people. He is more than willing to give them up for other people. And the only thing I put on my list for his weaknesses was stubbornness. I know I put it on the list for his strengths, but Dalinar takes a lot to change his mind. The very thing that makes him strong can also make him struggle. When he's settled on a decision, and this is what I'm going to do, he does it rock solidly, whether he's right or wrong. And the one thing that was a big enough deal to kind of knock him out of it and get him to change his mind and get out of his stubbornness was the biggest betrayal of his life. That's what it took to make him change his mind. And to a man of honor like Dalinar, this betrayal of Sadeas is going to feel so much worse than it would to any of the other High Princes. The other High Princes in Alethkar would get it. They don't want it to happen to them. They don't want to be the one who's being betrayed. But if someone is able to gain from that, they obviously deserve what they got from that betrayal because they were so smart. They were able to plan it, blah, blah, blah. That's not how Dalinar sees it. A man of honor doesn't betray someone like that. And before you think I've forgotten a very special character in Dalinar's life, you can't talk about a knight without mentioning his faithful steed. And Gallant is his faithful steed. Gallant is a strong, intelligent beast. They do not have the normal rider and horse relationship. They have more of a special bond. Gallant cares about Dalinar. Gallant, of his own free will, rushes in to rescue Dalinar. And in some ways I kind of think he should have gotten a little more attention in these books, but I think he could get a little more love, maybe some fan art. Maybe you could drop me a link to some good Gallant Dalinar fan art. I would love that. The first book ends with Dalinar being able to finally rediscover himself. He finds that those things that he has come to value in his life can be accomplished with the things he's actually good at. When he's kind of mock beating up the king and he says, I can train men to fight, he has his own history, he has his own strengths. He can use those to protect the king and the kingdom. He doesn't have to completely change or completely become somebody else. He can, to a certain extent, embrace the man that he was and use that going forward to do what needs to be done. So what do you think of Dalinar? What do you think his strengths and his weaknesses are? Do you think a strength and a weakness can be the same thing depending on how you channel it? Let me know. Tell me in the comments. Let's talk about him. Subscribe to my channel for more fantasy character videos. This is only the first Stormlight Archive character. There will be more. You can follow me on Instagram, and I will see you next time. Bye! Next, I'll be reading these! Okay, on the landing. Why did I write unlovable in my notes? Wait, are they brothers? Yeah, they are. I was just talking and going and it wasn't even recording! Ugh.